Good evening and welcome to our attendees for tonight's program. My name is Cindy Cross-Watts and I am a sophomore on the volleyball team and co-vice president for the Athletes of Color Coalition here on campus. As a part of our celebration of the 50th anniversary of Title IX and on the final day of Women's History Month, we are excited to have our esteemed former coach and administrator, Robin Sheppard, here to lead a conversation with our early birds. These three female Bantam student athletes were exceptional in competition and in the classroom, and their opportunity to excel in numerous sports was due to the enactment of Title IX in 1972. Future events for this celebration will reflect the progression of female athletes at Trinity with representation of diversity and inclusion of the Trinity female athlete community. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Tonight's program will be recorded. The recording will be made available on the 50th anniversary celebration of Title IX webpage on the Trinity website soon. Our host has prepared some questions for our guests, and we have some questions submitted from fellow student athletes as well. Please feel free to submit your questions or share your thoughts via the Q&A function throughout the evening. And now, on to our program. It is my distinct honor to introduce our host for the evening, Robin Sheppard, Professor of Physical Education Emerita, former Associate Athletic Director, and former coach. Robin came to Trinity in 1974, less than 2 years after the enactment of Title IX, as a graduate assistant coach and embarked one of the most successful coaching careers in our institution's history. She amassed an outstanding competitive record in both field hockey and lacrosse as a head coach for 25 years. Postseason successes included 10 ECAC championship appearances, 7 NIAC championship titles, and 7 NCAA championship appearances, 2 of which in the Final Four. She also was the head basketball coach and assistant swimming coach during her tenure. After retiring from coaching, she moved into athletic administration and served as the Associate Athletic Director and Senior Women Administrator and taught a very popular first-year seminar, Sports and Society, for several years before retirement. Robin's career at Trinity spanned an amazing 41 years. As we prepared for this event, it has been my pleasure learning about her career and the tremendous impact she had on women's athletics at Trinity. So without further delay, I would like to welcome our host, Robin Sheppard.
Thank you, Sydney. I don't know if I got a chance to tell Sydney this, but because volleyball and field hockey were in the same season, I literally don't think I saw a volleyball match until the year 2000. And once I retired from the sideline, it truly became one of my favorite sports. So Sydney, I will look forward to cheering you and your team on next fall. So welcome to our guests who have taken time out of their busy schedules to join us. As Sydney mentioned, our plan tonight is really twofold. We're going to celebrate the end of Women's History Month, and we're going to recognize the 50th anniversary of Title IX of the Educational Amendments Act of 1972. I'm hoping that there are some other early bird alumni out there listening, along with some of our current student athletes. And you are welcome to post questions in the Q&A function, as Sydney mentioned. If we don't get to them tonight, we will answer them in the coming days. Also, you should feel free to put comments in the chat function, although I know all the teammates of these three panelists, and I may have to censor those chats before we read them. So on with the show, let's get started. When I was asked to moderate this panel, I immediately thought of these three remarkable women, not just because of their athletic achievements, because of everything they accomplished both in and out of uniform. And I know in advertising for this event, we have posted their bios several times, but still, I think you need to meet them and hear how they came to Trinity, why they came to Trinity, what did they know about Trinity, and also what they accomplished in their 4 years while they were on campus. So we are going to start in Arizona with Kathy Ennis Britton, class of 1990, someone who sadly did not play my sports, so I never got to coach her, but I always wished I had. So Kathy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I do wish that I had been on one of your teams. Well, I think the first thing that you wanted us to talk a little bit about is how we ended up at Trinity. And I don't really have a great story. Soccer was pretty much my favorite sport. And every summer I went to the women's soccer camps. But I realized pretty early on that if I played Division I, there's no possible way that I could play more than one sport. And that was really important to me. I'd done it all through high school. And so I grew up in Connecticut. I'd heard of Trinity. I knew it was challenging academically. So I didn't, that's pretty much how I made my decision. It was so different back in the 80s. There was not even any discussion with coaches. I just walked on to each of the teams. I had no real sense of were they good or, who was on them or records or anything. So I did end up walking on. I had to write it down because I'm old now and I can't remember everything. So, but I ended up, I coordinated a major in both psych and education, started in the fall of '86 and graduated in '90. And during that time, I played 4 years of varsity soccer. I was the co-captain. We won the ECAC Division III champs. I was the NUISA, I made the NUISA and NSCAA All New England teams and the NSCAA All American team. Had a great time with those soccer ladies. On to basketball, I played 4 years of varsity and was a co-captain. And then on to softball, I was a captain, and then we were 2-time NIAC champions, which was very exciting. Other than that, I had a couple of things that also I was blessed enough to be able to get. One was the Trinity Blanket Award for 12 varsity letters. The next was the Trinity Club of Hartford Award for the Senior Female Athlete of the Year, and then the Susan E. Martin Award for the Senior Female Scholar Athlete of the Year. I was the President's Fellow for Educational Studies and was in Phi Beta Kappa. So it was a busy time doing the 3 sports and my student teaching and running onto the field as the game started. But what a wonderful, wonderful time. And this has been great to walk down memory lane. Currently, I'm living here in Arizona. I have 4 children. Jet is 22 and he works here at PS Academy, Arizona with me. PS Academy is a school for kids with autism, a K-12 school, and it's my passion and something that I love dearly. I have identical twins, which is a real shock. Anna and Taya, they're 19. Taya played softball through high school and Anna plays beach and court volleyball in college. And my son Jonah is 17. And I'm also the proud mom of 3 rescue pit bulls.
Great. Kathy doesn't remember this, but that first championship in soccer that she mentioned, I remember them scrambling. They needed somebody to drive the van to the contest, and I volunteered to drive the van. So I remember I was a little miserable, but then the game was so exciting and you won. So I remember being part of that. It was really cool.
That's great.
And now from the woods of South Carolina, someone who I did get to coach in 2 sports is a class of 1980, Laurie Ferguson Plum. Here you go, Laurie.
All right. Well, thank you. First of all, it's quite an honor, and I was very, very touched and excited to be asked by Robin to share my stories or story. There'll be stories, don't worry. And it was early days. I walked on the campus of Trinity College in the fall of '76 and had heard about it through a couple different sources. Upperclassmen at the school I went to in Philadelphia, the Shipley School, and an upperclassman had gone off to Trinity, and I had played field hockey and lacrosse with her. And Carter Wirtz, I'm sure if you're out there, you're a big reason why I chose Trinity, in addition to a family friend, Jerry Hansen, who had lived and his daughter went to Shipley with me, but then they moved to Connecticut. And Jerry Hansen then became a big figure in the development office at Trinity. And since it was only a couple of years after, I guess the women's sports are, that Robin was there, she would remember. I don't have that recollection, but he's like, Laurie, if you want to play squash, because I also played squash in high school. So I played field hockey, squash, and lacrosse, and started a squash team at my high school with actually another fellow classmate who came to Trinity as well. And he's like, yep, we've got 3 great squash courts here at Trinity College. And I said, well, yeah, I look, there are not many squash courts at some of the other schools I'm looking at, nor would I've gotten into those schools. So he said, you got to take a look. So I felt really fortunate to be able to go to Trinity with all those pieces of equipment for the 3 sports that I truly loved. And like Kathy said, there was no such thing as like a discussion with the coaches. You just show up, and if you could do the run test, Robin, you're okay to go. So I had a great time, and I feel like it was my freshman, sophomore, and junior and senior years. I played, I'm not sure, I think in the back of the day we had JV hockey, if I'm correct, Robin. And so I played varsity for 3 years in field hockey, and varsity for squash for 4 years, no, 3 years, because I went abroad my junior year. My major was American Studies, and I was fortunate enough to be involved in an exchange program in University of East Anglia, which is in England. Sounds like it's another land. And they had direct exchange with the colleges, and students came from University of East, UEA, we called it, to Trinity, and in exchange, students from Trinity went to UEA. And I went January to June of my junior year. So I did not do the 2 winter sports, squash and lacrosse, or winter and spring. And then was varsity for those 3 sports in my senior year. And it was quite an experience to, wasn't aware of any of the fact of just that I couldn't play. It was just come back and just go right back into the fold, and was co-captain with Lisa Parker of the field hockey team my senior year. And our senior year, I don't think we did it junior year, but I know senior year we went to, maybe it was junior year, we made it to all New England's in field hockey, and that was exciting. I never even experienced that in high school, because we was a small independent school. We didn't have that kind of extended tournaments. And after that, and I wasn't aware of it, but I was, I guess, early days as a really early bird in 1980. I think I'm pretty sure I received the blanket award for the varsity letters, and the first female to actually have that honor. And an award was also given to me for leadership and sportsmanship from the AD Middleton Award. And it was, that was quite an honor. It just didn't really dawn on me. I was just playing sports. I was just happy to be out and making friends and having teammates, and the competition was fun and phenomenal, and lifetime friends. I've talked over an hour and a half with my teammates, and one roommate that these are all my roommates at Trinity, and we for almost 40 years we've been having these annual Zoom and or mostly dinners in person. It's just a unique experience to walk away from that. And now I live in a split life. I live the summers in New England and the winters in South Carolina, and we have 3 children. I married a Trinity man and also a 3-sport athlete, Bob Plum, and we have 3 wonderful children. Our oldest is 31, mother of our 2 grandchildren, 2 boys, and they live in Dallas. And I have a son, Will. He and his wife are just moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and my youngest son is 26, and he lives in Boston. And all the males in the family are in commercial real estate. And so it's a real, this has really been amazing. Just diving back into the years of Trinity. I had an amazing experience there. And American Studies major was terrific because it let you, I felt so liberated because I could design my own major as to what my concentrations were. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Right.
Anyway,
Great.
that's all I got.
Thank you, Lori. And now a true original from Florida, who, with the help of philosophy professor Drew Highland and coach Jeff McPhee, I can also say I had the privilege of coaching Lanier Drew, class of 1980.
Thank you, Robin. I'm also honored, like Lori and Kathy, to be chosen to speak to this group. And it seems like an awful long time ago, so I've got notes too, Kathy, because I can't remember how to. But we have really, you know, gotten together a little bit and drummed up some memories. So it's exciting to share this with you. So I got to Trinity from Florida. There were only 3 in my freshman class that came to Trinity from Florida. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the people who was partially responsible for getting me here is on the call tonight because he was a Trinity graduate. He happened to be one of my college advisors. I'd never heard of Trinity College in Little Jacksonville, Florida, but I'd heard of some other schools. And I was looking up north, and he said, "What do you think about Trinity?" I was like, "I've never heard of Trinity." Well, he made sure I found out about Trinity. And he also knew that I loved sports. And in addition to wanting a good academic school, I wanted to play the sports that I love to play. In Florida, basketball and swimming were my 2 big sports. I did also play some other sports, softball and soccer, but those are my 2 big sports. And they were different seasons in Florida. But when you come up north, they're the same season. So I said to this college advisor, "Can I play both of these sports in the same season?" He said, "Well, I just happen to know the football coach up there, who happens to also coach swimming. And here's his, here's how you get in touch with him." So I wrote to Chet McPhee, like, a handwritten letter. I know you guys don't know what that is anymore, but it was a letter to Chet McPhee explaining that I wanted to play both of these sports because the other colleges I was speaking to wanted me just to swim. And I was really tired of, I didn't want to just swim. I wanted to do much of sports. And of course, Chet, if any of you know Chet, said, "Absolutely." I don't even know if he checked with you, Robin, but he told me it was perfectly fine to do 2 sports in one season. So I know that sounds like kind of a silly reason, but it's almost like Kathy's reason. She could play her 3 sports and Lori as well. We were all about sports. We just wanted to come play sports. So after Chet said yes, I thought that's where I want to go because, I wanted to keep playing sports. And so I came for that reason. And then like the other 2 had great experiences once I got there. So my fall of freshman year, I didn't have a sport because my 2 sports were going to be winter sports. So I didn't do anything fall of my freshman year. But I played softball that spring and I was so early on. I like to tell Lori, I didn't do the preppy sports like she did. The preppy sports were all like developed, but I did a lot of the sports that weren't developed. So I don't think I even had but 1 varsity sport, Robin.
I think that's right.
I mean, all of my sports were called informal sports or something along that line. I can't remember exactly what they're called. So I never achieved a blanket because even though I played that many sports and that many seasons, I didn't get any letters because we didn't have varsity letters in sports. So I played softball along with my friend Denise Jones. They were trying to get enough athletes in some of these sports so they could become varsity sports, if I remember correctly.
That's
Is that right, Robin? Mm-hmm. So a bunch of swimmers went out there and played softball, and Denise Jones was one of them as well. And so I played sophomore my freshman year. And then in the fall of my sophomore year, a lady named Kathy Schlein and I were the cross country team. We didn't have a cross country team, so we started the cross country team, just 2 of us. And we ran with the men and, loved every minute of it. But we were the team. Then I went back into my swimming and basketball for the winter, and then I ran track in the spring. And then my junior year, I went away for the fall. And so I missed a lot of my sports, or Lori said we kind of forfeited our opportunity to play sports for that time. And then ran track in the spring. And then senior year, when I came back, I think I dropped basketball because Robin was no longer the coach and I didn't like the new coach.
There you go.
So since Robin was no longer the coach, I think I only did 3 sports my senior year. So that's my sports history at Trinity, a total of 5 different sports. I know you can't do that today, and I feel blessed that I was able to do all those sports because one of the things that came out of doing all those different sports was that Robin made me run around the indoor field house 20 laps for the basketball team. I hated running. And later on in life, which I'll get to, I became a marathon runner, and that was turned out to be my best sport of all. I thank Robin for getting me started on that road, even though I didn't like it at the time. So I was a classics major at Trinity, which there were very few classics majors. I kind of picked classics because I had been taking Latin. I took a lot of Latin in high school, and then I took it at Trinity. I was going to become a math major, but it got really above my head at some point. So I switched and I did Latin and Greek languages, which is kind of unusual, but loved every minute of it, and subsequently taught in high school. When I left, I taught Latin. So I think I've almost got the same awards that Kathy got. 10 years after she did, I got the junior scholar athlete, the senior scholar athlete. I was Phi Beta Kappa, and I got the classics, presidential classics fellow for classics and classics, for the classics major. So those are mine. I think I was a captain of one or two of those teams in there, but I can't remember.
Yeah,
So
I know.
that's my general Trinity experience. It was fabulous. I loved all my coaches, even though Robin says she didn't know basketball that well. I thought she was a great coach, and then she was my swimming coach too. That was kind of interesting. She was my basketball coach first, and then she became my swimming coach. And of course, Chet was our beloved swim coach the whole time. Post-collegiately, I did start running, and I ran competitively for about 15 years. Ran 26 marathons, the 84 and the 88 Olympic trials. 84 was the first ever Olympic trials. And another person who might be in the audience tonight, I hope she is, Jane Millspaw. I don't know if any of you guys remember Jane's name, but she ran the 84 Olympic marathon trials with me, which is another interesting connection. I had a coach who we actually trained together, and we ran that marathon together. So that was pretty exciting. And when I left Trinity, I did teach for 4 years. I loved it. I taught Latin, science, and math, and I coached cross-country, track, basketball, swimming. So I took, leads from people like Robin, and I loved every minute of it. Subsequently went to law school, and I've been in-house at a hospital system here in Jacksonville for like 26 years now. Looking to retire soon, but not quite yet. So I'm married. I have a beautiful 21-year-old daughter who has no athletic skill whatsoever at all. I'm not sure what happened. I love her to death, but that's not her thing. And 2 stepdaughters, and married happily for 32 years to an Englishman who also was a marathoner.
Wow, awesome.
So I would be remiss if, with Lanier's help, I didn't tell the story that I always tell whenever I speak about the early days, which is when Coach Chet McPhee, who we all have in common and all miss so much, when he came to me and said that he had just told this new prospective student that she could do both, I'm like, how does that work? Well, this is how it works, folks. It works that she said, we made you do double practices, couple hours of basketball, and then you went swimming, or vice versa.
You did the double practices, Robin. You made us apparently do double practice.
Oh my God. This is, for somebody who didn't know how to coach basketball, I'm making them run 2 miles and whatever. And so now it's basketball game day. I can't win without Lanier on the court. I know that much about basketball. Chet needs her, or he can't win her events up in the swimming pool. So, and of course, they're at the same time on the same day. And if you're familiar, as I hope everybody listening tonight is, so we're in Oosting Gym, the volleyball, basketball gym. And when the doors shut, I think there's still those little slender windows. And I would shut the doors because we had a basketball game going on. Lanier is busting her butt on the court, stealing, the greatest stealer of ever. And all of a sudden I hear, and I look up, and there is Coach McPhee's face in that little window. And he's going like this, looking at his watch, pointing to Lanier, which means get her off the court. So I sub her out. She shoots through the door. It's now the weight room, but it used to be our old pool. She shoots through the stairwell. She literally, I haven't seen this, gets on the blocks, does her event, comes down soaking wet, hair wet, body wet, puts her, now I tell the story that she wore her swimsuit under her basketball uniform. Lanier, have we decided whether that's true or am I
I don't
embellishing?
remember. I mean, you've told it so many times, I'm starting to believe it, so I'm not.
Let's go with that. I like that. I like that. So soaking wet swimsuit, throws on her basketball uniform, boom, back out there. A few minutes later, there's old Chet at the door because her next team. I mean, it's, you can't make that stuff up. You just can't make it up. So thank you three for coming to Trinity and excelling in so much. And it's been a real treat to reconnect with everybody. So I'm going to ask our audience before we move on to a couple questions, if you'll just indulge me a little bit so I can provide some context and a timeline for both coeducation at Trinity and the passage of Title IX before we kind of dive into these other questions. I think everybody on this call, on the Zoom tonight, knows that Trinity accepted women in 1969. Unlike all the academic departments who now are teaching the same course, the same lecture, only to a co-ed class, Trinity, literally, the athletic department had to create a sports program from nothing. So, you know, that means you need competitive and practice facilities, you need coaches, you need uniforms, you need schedules, you need meal money. And how did they do that? They hired someone who her name has already been brought up. They hired Jane Millspaugh. Jane, people keep thinking I was the first woman. I wasn't close. They immediately hired Jane Millspaugh, who actually was a great mentor to me when I came a few years later. And Jane was charged with what we just described, creating the women's sports programs. So Laurie, she coached you in squash.
She coached squash, and she never made me run laps. I just had to jump rope for about 10, 15, 20 minutes. That was.
There you go. There you go. So Jane Millspaugh, with the help of a lot of volunteer men's coaches, male coaches who were doing their own sports, by the way, between Jane and those few male coaches, they got things off the ground. Now, I wasn't there, but I always think this when I think about women's early sports. Unlike that Field of Dreams motto, you know, from the movie, build it and they will come. I've got to believe the motto was, they came and now we have to build whatever they want, because it was like that. Here's an example. In the fall of 1969, 150 women were admitted to Trinity, 150. Oh. The very next fall, 41 of those showed up to play field hockey. And oh, by the way, we didn't have a varsity team. We had an informal team. The following fall, in 1971, field hockey became a varsity sport because of Jane Millspaugh. So now they may have only had 4 games on their schedule, and they may have been local. We may have driven in private cars, but we were a varsity team. We had a schedule and we were competitive. So that takes us to the summer of 72, right? When Title IX passed. And although Title IX, I always think, as I think everybody does, it's synonymous with athletics. The truth is it wasn't designed for athletics at all. It was actually written to bring attention to academic discrimination, because at that time, women were being denied entry into law school, med school, merely on the fact that they were a woman. And so a group got together and wrote this for academic discrimination, and they intentionally tucked it into another educational bill, hoping that it would kind of be undercover, because they didn't want to make a big deal about it. And the supporters of it didn't make a big deal. They kept a very low profile, and they had it right because it passed. It got passed. It was all about education. Athletics and sports didn't really appear. So here's what it said. No person, here's what it says. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And most people think, and that's kind of what I wanted to take some time out to mention this, because of our 3 panels, I think most people thought that when that passed in 1972, a light switch went on and gender discrimination in sports just disappeared. Trust me, in 1972, for those of you who were around listening, right, there was no internet, there were no computers, there was no cell phone, there was no Google, there was no social media. My TV station had 3 channels, and I think the news came on twice a day, maybe for 15 or 20 minutes. So Title IX was, it remained a mystery. The passage of it remained a mystery, just because of a lack of knowledge. One small personal story, right after Title IX passed, I entered my junior year in college for field hockey, and nothing changed. I went up to the locker room. There was 1 kilt. I had to provide shoes, stick, shin guards, socks, and I can still remember myself and all my teammates running around looking for a white shirt with a Peter Pan collar, because that's what we had to wear. That was our jersey, a white shirt with a Peter Pan collar. We were not allowed in the training room. We sat on a little patch of grass, and after our athletic trainer taped all the male sports, if there was a roll of tape left over and you wanted your ankle taped, so be it, you got your ankle taped. And this was a school that was already coeducational. We weren't even like admitting women, right at that same time. We had women there for a long time. So by the time I was hired in 1974 as a grad student, and it was Jane and Robin, I have to sadly confess that I knew nothing about Title IX. And here I was, I'm about to lead the next generation of young women, and I truly knew nothing. And everything I learned after that was either from Jane or from our athletic director, Carl Kurth. I emphasize that because for several years there, right when these panelists were competing at Trinity, there was almost a stagnant period. I mean, Trinity was adding sports for women as they showed their talent and their interest. And a few things improved, a few things. We got new uniforms for something, and they hired a 3rd coach, Lanier, which is how I got excused from basketball. But for the most part, things didn't move as quickly as you think they did. And yet, Lanier and Laurie were right in the middle of that. And Kathy, you came in an interesting time, because right around your period of competition, all the athletic directors at all the colleges received some Title IX guidelines and regulations. So now, Carl Kurth and I are starting to juggle a lot of balls in the air going, oh man, we got to get in compliance. What do we do? And we're starting to assign male coaches to women's teams, which is, I think, what in your case happened in softball. So I just wanted to give that not so brief, just kind of background before we move into the next question. And so the next question is an obvious one, and that is, and any of the 3 of you can start. We don't have to go in order, and you can cut each other off, as I will challenge as well. Were you 3 more knowledgeable than I was? Did you know about Title IX in high school? Had you heard it? Did you know what it meant? I'm assuming you knew that Trinity used to be all male, but were you aware of how recently we had gone co-ed? And just what was the vibe on campus? What was the atmosphere? Did you feel valued? Anybody?
I'll jump in because I was aware that women had most recently been, admitted and started to attend Trinity, mainly because the school I went to was an all-girls school and I was there for 13 years. So the prospect of going to a college that actually was co-ed, and the ratio was really heavy on the guys. I was like, wow, this is great. But the good news is that a girlfriend of mine, the class ahead of me, Shipley, had gone there and she was playing the same sports. And the fact that I was fortunate to be able to play more than one sport was, which I loved doing all of them. I wouldn't have been able to make a choice. I felt that I was valued getting on campus, because it was like, we have teams and we're competitive, we have schedules. And I was fortunate that I was in the sports that had more established, like the field hockey, squash, and lacrosse. And actually one thing I thought was really intriguing to me, starting out with squash in college, because I only played in high school and it was a sort of a locally competitive tournaments, etc. I didn't realize that squash was considered a Division I sport, if you will, because we played Division I schools. There wasn't any delineation like with field hockey. We weren't playing like the Ivy Leagues or whatnot, but we were in squash. And I thought that was really intriguing. We played a lot of tournaments that were collaborative, sort of like for you, Lanier, maybe when you would go to swim meets, because I feel like swimming was also ultimately across the levels of divisions. It was more, I don't know, I may be wrong on that, but I just thought that the breadth, the depth and the breadth of the expanse of all the opportunities to travel while playing the field hockey and lacrosse, and then a little bit farther reaching travel with the squash was just I value that experience. It was just such a great exposure.
Great, that's super.
All those field hockey, squash, not lacrosse. When I studied abroad, I played on co-ed teams because in England, that's what they do, field hockey. It turned into be a little rougher sport than I thought it would be, and then the squash, that was also co-ed. It was really interesting and a lot of fun.
Lanier, did you have a similar?
Yeah, I would echo Lori's experience as well. I did know it was co-ed and had just gone co-ed because my college advisor, David Sample, who I mentioned before, he also went to Trinity. I think he graduated, and I think the girls came while he was there. So I did know that, but I didn't really think much about it. I mean, okay, so it's co-ed now. That's good. That means I can go there. As far as feeling valued, I definitely felt valued. I mean, how can you not feel valued when Chet is your coach? I mean, he makes everybody feel valued. And I laughed about this when we were talking before this tonight, but I didn't know I had a bunch of Ted Lasso coaches. I didn't realize that because I mean, Chet, that wasn't his main sport. I mean, he coached other stuff. And Robin, basketball, she tells you tonight, she brought Drew Highland in to help, but I never felt, maybe in high school, I didn't have like pro coaches either, except for in swimming. I had a really strong swimming coach, but I loved my coaches. I never felt that I didn't have the best, when they brought in somebody to replace Robin, she knew basketball, but I didn't like her at all. So I loved my coaches. And my softball coach was Bill Schultz, if anybody remembers Billy. And that wasn't his sport either. I don't remember what his main sport was. Robin, maybe you can remind me.
Was it Roby or Bill?
Bill.
Bill? My gosh, I don't even remember that.
Yeah, it was his son. Because I just had dinner with him not long ago, and we were talking about it. So, and then cross country, there was a good coach, but like I said, I was so early on. Lori did join the more developed sports, and I felt valued because they were letting us start the programs. I mean, I never felt like, I guess I didn't know any better, to be honest. I didn't know that I should have, equal anything, or I did have some friends because I came from such a strong swimming program in Florida that some of my friends were starting to go to big state schools that were giving them money. But the cost of college was so different back then. I mean, I laughed about it. I told Robin I found my application thing was $5,600 all in, you guys, for us to go to Trinity. And that's just hard for me to imagine how much it's gone up since then. So the need for scholarship money was very different as well. But so I did have a lot of friends that got scholarships when in swimming to school. So I knew a little bit about it, but really wasn't a big part of my consciousness. I was just like Lori. I was happy to play all my sports and wanted to do whatever I wanted to do, and I always felt valued because of the coaches.
That's great. Hey, Kathy, before it's your turn, can I throw something out there?
Sure.
You can ignore this if you want. In doing some reading of how other colleges are celebrating 50 years of Title IX, I happen to be on the Harvard website, and a woman who played at Harvard in the 70s, so before you were at Trinity, she described in great detail, and this is a phrase she used, she described it as the joys and the indignities of being a female athlete. And that didn't necessarily make me think of you until just maybe. But what it did for me, honestly, was, and we've all been, while we've been preparing for this over the past couple of weeks, different memories have popped up, right? And I've been jotting mine down, and a couple of them were indignities, I have to say, as a coach, and I will share them. I really have thought they've all been joyful, because there was nothing better than having a 41-year career at Trinity College, I can tell you that. So anyway, let me pass the baton to you, and you can use that if that helps you balance.
Absolutely. I've really been thinking a lot about it, because overall, just like Lori and Lanier have said, I did feel very valued and I loved my experience. But I think it's really important to be honest about some of the things that that we've now grown from, and Trinity is now doing a better job of. I don't know, when I was a student athlete, I'm not sure if the rule all the way through was that you had to coach 2 sports, head coach 2 sports. Is that the case?
I would say that was correct, yeah. There were a few of us doing 3 for a while, but almost everybody did 2.
Okay, so that was the interesting part, because I was lucky enough to come through with an amazing group of young women my age, Lisa Banks, Leanne LeBrun, I'm saying everybody's maiden names, Robin Silver, Karen Farquhar.
This is the group I don't trust in the chat room.
Oh, they're on and they're texting me. But really, the Karen Gelomino, Karen Leonard, there were a group of us who had such phenomenal experiences in high school being coached, that when we got to the collegiate level, when we were playing the sports, let's see how I can phrase this, the teams that I played on, where I was coached by the coach's second sport, not their kind of expertise and the one that they were, completely all about. We did a lot of self-coaching. I mean, we worked together, we helped each other, we supported each other. And I don't remember feeling at the time that was, an indignity or something like that. But instead I found that we gained such leadership skills, and we were so confident in ourselves. And it ended up kind of coming around and being a positive. But honestly, I mean, there were some times when we were out there lining the softball field, or when we ordered our own uniforms our senior year, there were a couple of indignities. Yeah. Overall, I felt very valued. We had Chet, which everybody keeps bringing up, Drew Highland, Rick Hazelton, you, Robin. There were so many people who supported us. I really think that it wasn't malicious. I think it was almost like, and we didn't know to expect more. We just said, this is what we're doing. It wasn't something that was, very obvious. I don't feel like there was discrimination or different things, but there were times where, as a woman athlete, you kind of said, well, that's what I get, and that's how we moved on. And we still had so much fun, and we still really got our teams where they needed to be, whether it was help from each other. So it was definitely a positive, but I loved your quote.
Oh, yeah. Um, You know, one thing, Laurie, you might have to chime in on this one. This is not an indignity either, but it's one of those things where I was like, oh, you have that and we don't have that. And it occurred, I got invited, I won't say to which banquet, but I got invited to a male athletes banquet, male coaches banquet. And I sat there all night going, oh my God, all these trophies and all these plaques and all these awards. And I went back and I thought, well, what do we do? Laurie's laughing. What do we do at our banquets? And so we started doing skits. And then because I happen to think I'm quite crafty, I started doing crafts. And am I right? These, Laurie, these were our awards.
With
Yeah.
the, with little awards, you know, best, you know, I don't know, highest goal scorer, or, you know, most improved, and on a
Yeah.
hockey ball or a lacrosse ball, you get the game ball for this or the game, but that was fine for us.
Yeah, and it wasn't, again, back to what Kathy, you just said, it wasn't malicious. It's just so happened that men have been playing sports since beginning of Trinity, and almost all, if not all of those trophies and awards are endowed, right? And we weren't there yet. I'll throw this out because it's one of the memories that popped up during the fall of field hockey. When daylight savings happened and it got dark really early. My field hockey team, we had to come in Ferris at, I don't know, 5:05, 10 after 5, and we could have a game the next day. And our field hockey field, besides being the outfield of this baseball field, was also the freshman football field. And Chet McPhee was the freshman football coach. So when we went co-ed, Chet gave us his freshman football field. And there was an old scoreboard there that baseball used to track innings and balls and everything, right? A really old one. It's long gone now. And after my field hockey team, Laurie, after you came indoors because it was too dark, the varsity football program, probably Bob, your husband, they would come and they would hook some spotlights up on that old scoreboard and flash it down on our field hockey field and bring their whole squad over, 90 to 100 guys, and have another hour and a half practice on our field hockey field. It may be the first and only time I registered a complaint. I think I cried, probably, knowing me. And I think Carl Kurth, who I think the world of to this day, he was my father away from home. I think he said, it's football, Robin, give it up. Football, Robin, give it up. And you know what? I gave it up because I nowhere else to turn. Okay, listen, thank you. And Kathy, you explained that really, really well.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This has to do with anything you might want to share again about your own personal experience, but I'm also kind of looking at Kathy and Laurie, how your sense of things has changed since Title IX has started being enforced. So anything with your daughter's experience you might want to share, since you have daughters that did play in college, or maybe yourselves that you guys have noticed. Kathy, what did you notice?
Well, if I would like to maybe try to compare the two experiences of when I was younger. So one thing I shared with the group yesterday or the other day when we did a bit of a rehearsal was that I'm from a very small town in Connecticut. And when I was young, I mean, my father had us out in the backyard, my two brothers and we were throwing the ball around, and we were then playing basketball at the school courts. There was no difference in how I was treated in my own family being an athlete. And so I don't think I really understood that girls, it was unusual for girls to play sports at those early ages. But I do remember that it came time for a little league tryouts. And I just went to the tryout thinking, of course I'll go because I play baseball. And it was so interesting because not a single boy who played baseball or anybody in my classes in elementary school, not a single one cared that I was a girl. They knew that I could play fine and they were good with that. And it was never even discussed. But I was floored as a little girl at the feeling that I got from the dads. They were not happy. They did not like that I was out there with their sons. And I remember I told them this, that in the Little League opening day with the pitcher, the only sixth grader who had a mustache at the time, I was hit 4 times on opening day because, you could hear the dad saying, don't let her, she's just a girl, don't let her get a hit off of you. And it wasn't the pitcher, I was good friends with him, but I could just feel the pressure that he felt. And it was so confusing to me. I just didn't understand why wouldn't, and like, who cared what it was? But that went on for years. And I'm so happy that my own daughters and sons played on teams all the way through their school experiences. Without that, there was no mention, it just wasn't a topic. And I know that my daughter Taya played softball in a very large school out here in Arizona. And she still was battling a lot of the Title IX things. She would come home and she'd be frustrated and she'd say, Mom, the boys team had their banquet at this beautiful posh, resort. And we had ours in the cafeteria with a couple little banners and maybe some sandwiches from the, local sub shop. So it's unfortunately still an issue at times. And then my other daughter, who's now playing volleyball in college, she's had a pretty good experience. She's, they get amazing uniforms and things that I'm very envious of. But I still feel like, there've really been some ups and downs, and I don't think we're there yet across the board, or maybe we never will be, but we've definitely made some strides from those Little League days early on.
Yeah. Kathy, it's interesting because so many of the parents now are so well educated on what this is and what it means. And the students are too. I mean, Professor Rennie Falco in political science, she teaches every year a semester course on just Title IX. Mm-hmm. And so the college students know, and the high school students know, and the parents know. So it's
interesting.
It's disappointing, isn't it? Yeah.
It is sometimes, yes.
So Laurie, I'm going to preface your answer by saying that, just in case you weren't going to say it, her daughter, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I knew. She was in the country the most sought after lacrosse high school player in the country when she was a senior, or maybe even a junior. Am I right on that? Mm-hmm. Sarah Plum. Google her.
She was even in a who's who in Sports Illustrated. That one section.
Faces in the crowd.
Faces in the crowd. Thank you. I mean, I should know because I worked for Sports Illustrated for 10 years in ad sales, but it was after I left that I got that sent to me many issues by a colleague who was still at Sports Illustrated. I'm like, thanks, this is great. We have it framed. But no, Sarah is a really good example of, I think, a beneficiary of all that Title IX, the intentions of having athletic programs for men and women on an even playing field, no pun intended. But her experience in high school, she went to a co-ed school in Dedham, Massachusetts, called Noble and Greeno, and it was originally an all-male school. and it had gone co-ed, probably around the time of the 70s, likely. And she started in, early 2000, but her, 2000. And she was lucky to play, she played in established sports and the co-ed program that it seemed very, well, coached by both the men's teams and the female team, the women's teams. And she played field hockey and basketball and lacrosse and had a great time, and didn't realize that there were such things as developmental teams out there that help you get seen and noticed out there in the big wide world of recruiting. It was very far off her radar because maybe she got this from me. She's just very happy to be playing and being with teammates and whatnot. And if it wasn't for a friend of the father of one of her teammates, whose teammate was a year younger than Sarah, and said, so what team is she playing on? And Bob and I are going, well, this, of course. And no. I mean, what developmental team is she doesn't. And he goes, you have to do it now. Like it's urgent. And so I feel like those opportunities, I mean, when I was growing up, but I didn't even know about that stuff. I was maybe aware of field hockey going on, but I didn't really know of anything like that. And so I feel like that helped her and then get more aware. And then the recruiting thing was a whirlwind. We were completely naive and no idea what this is all about. Fortunately, she had a college counselor at the time at Nobles who was very aware of her situation and was a good mentor during the process. And then when she ultimately chose Dartmouth for her, it was interesting because she'd also been really heavily recruited by a school that offered her a scholarship, but not a position that she would normally play, and not guarantee that she would play on the field her first few years at the school. And it just didn't add up to say, I was like, but I just want to play lacrosse. So it was very interesting. Her ultimate decision and then experience she had at Dartmouth was quite remarkable. And I think she said there it also was all male and had gone co-ed around the time Trinity did. Yep. And it was, she never felt undervalued. I always felt appreciated. I had this conversation with her today, knowing that I would be talking about her. And she just felt that both teams overall, both men and women, were treated equally, so to speak, even locker room facilities and whatnot. But it was really just the overall general facilities that if they needed updating or whatnot, it wasn't because they were saying, well, we're not going to, renovate the women's locker room. Well, because the men take priority. They would just do it all in, piecemeal at a time, but for both. She didn't feel like there was any discrimination whatsoever. And traveling and the funding, that all of that was very equal.
Very. I'm sorry I never got to meet her and I never got to see her play, but and she's the one with the 2 grandchildren.
Yes, yes, we have 2 boys. Very good for her.
Before I move on to the next question, I just got 2 texts. One, Jane Millspa is on.
Yay. Hi,
Jane. And even though her last name's butchered a little bit, but it's actually Jane Millspa Saris now. Hi, Jane. And this is as exciting. Jane must have been a popular name. This needs a little explanation. So Jane was hired, and Jane Millspa was hired in full time. But then they were trying to get kind of cheap labor, so they kept hiring grad assistants. So young people like I was, for 2 years, you get your master, you coach 3 sports, you teach during the day, and then at night you go to graduate classes. And after 2 years, hopefully you get your master's, and then you're gone. And they hire another young coach to come in and do what you just did. Fortunately for me, after my 2 years was almost up, I think about this all the time. I was applying for a job at Amherst, Oh, and Carl Kurth came out and offered me a full-time job. But the other text, there was a GA in between Jane Millspaugh and me, and her name was Jane Fox. And she's on.
Come on.
And Fraschilla, Jane Fox Fraschilla. Is that interesting? Two Janes. And I don't know, Jane, thank you, both Janes, thanks for joining us. I don't know if Jane Fox and I ever met, because like I said, she came and she left and then I came. But I've actually, she wouldn't believe that, I've tried to track her down using Facebook or whatever, and I have been unsuccessful. I could be wrong on this, but I'm going to take a stab at it. I know Jane Millspaugh is a Springfield College alum, and I believe Jane Fox went to Temple. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but somebody will text me and tell me. So next question is, I don't know if you follow, I know you three have very busy lives. I don't know if you follow current bantam sports for women. Just wondered what you thought about them, if you follow them on Instagram or on the website or anything. And if you can answer that, or if you can't answer that, kind of the big one. What do you think you gained from your 4 years of playing sports at Trinity College? What have you taken off the campus and made it part of your ethos for your life and your career? Either one of those.
I'm going to jump in on the following the sports. I definitely been following the sports, and it's hard to divide one's heart into three ways, but between the field hockey, squash, and lacrosse. I mean, I feel like with the field hockey and lacrosse, it's been very rewarding to see how far the programs have come and how many finals, and I all the acronyms are just all blended together right now on stage here, but going to final NCAAs and all that, it's just so exciting, and it makes my heart sing because you could just, it's palpable, the camaraderie and the energy, and some of my friends' children are on those teams, and just to have that celebration, and it just, the beat goes on. I mean, we were all just as enthused and excited, and we were just thrilled to beat a rival down at Wesleyan on their crummy field, or Tufts, but sticks and rocks and whatever, playing lacrosse. But it was but just following the teams and then feeling like you can give back. And I wish I'd been more present, like my former teammates or Lisa Parker, to go to alumni games. I don't think I could run a sprint from one end of the 100-yard dash and come up successful dribbling a hockey stick or cradling a lacrosse. I probably pass out, but it's really it's quite remarkable. And then the part of the question, other than that, gosh, I just forgot the second part, Robin.
Remember. Just asking, what have you taken from your sports at Trinity? And
so that I translate just to finish off, so somebody else to say something. I really got very involved in coaching lacrosse after college. First of all, immediately after college, I played on a lacrosse team in outside Philadelphia, and then I moved. That was actually when I came back, and then another. I played on a squash team in Baltimore when I worked there, and a lacrosse team, and then went into New York, and I played competitive squash for a long time, and even in Boston when we moved there. And but the coaching began for me when Sarah was in 4th grade, and I coached the town team in Mass, and then that segued to when she went to Nobles. I started coaching there, and but when she was a little older, so I was coaching middle school kids when she was a freshman, and that I wasn't competing with that with her. And then when she became a senior, was on the varsity, I said I'd like to be able to watch the games. So I was in middle school, doing middle school, then JV, and then she left. Oh, she left to go to college, and when she came back, Sarah became the head coach, a teaching fellow and a head coach at Nobles, head lacrosse coach and college counselor. And that first winter she was working there at Nobles, she said, well, Mom, we're looking for a coach for the middle school. And I'm like, oh my God, my arm just broke. Yeah, sure. And I was happy to jump back in the fold after 4-year hiatus when she was in college. And I ended up co-coaching at Nobles with a fellow Shipley alum and Trinity alum, 10 years younger, Nan Camp Buzzy. Now, and it was just wonderful to share our mutual experiences. She played field hockey,
Yeah.
and lacrosse, so like mirror images, 10 years apart. It was really special. That was great, and I feel like the coaching really was my way. I mean, Robin, you're way up there on their coaching style, and it just came naturally, and I think it's because of all the mentoring you did for us.
Thanks, Lori. Lanier, what about you? Do you follow the Trinity? Are you able to from so far away?
I have to admit I haven't followed a lot of sports, but I do follow the track and field because in terms of what I left Trinity with, as much as I love all these other sports, basketball, there was no place for me to really play basketball when I left, and swimming I was kind of done with as well. Having probably swum my best times even senior year in high school, you kind of peak sometimes early in swimming, except for Michael Phelps, of course, who peaked at 32. And then softball I dropped. So really running is what I took forward from Trinity. And so I do still look at those times. The swimming times blow me away. I can't even relate to the swimming times because they've gotten so much faster with the track and field. I love Rick Hazelton was my coach in track and field, and I took a lot. I mean, that really developed. Again, you get credit, Robin, whether you want to take it or not. You get credit because you started me running, and then Rick developed me. And I can't remember who it was besides Ralph Waldy. Who would have been my cross country coach besides Ralph Waldy?
Miller Brown?
I can't remember. But anyway.
Some of these names that Lanier is mentioning who were not in the athletic department, they were faculty members, similar to Drew Highland. So one was a math professor, and I thought Miller Brown, who was also in philosophy.
I was going to say
Miller definitely helped us. I definitely ran some with him. He definitely helped, but I feel like there was some other coach. I'll have to look back. He was skinny, whoever it was. Anyway, my senior year at Trinity, I actually ran 3 marathons. So I'd already gotten that bug. That was right when New York City Marathon was, getting hot. So fall, I ran New York City. Spring, I ran Savannah, qualifying myself for Boston. And then Sue McCarthy, one of the one of the grads that we were talking about, actually took me up to Boston for that race with a broken arm. By the way, I'll have to tell you, I had a broken arm because I played Unit D basketball. A month before I beat my arm. I don't know if you guys remember what Unit D is, but
absolutely.
You could go down and play with all the professors. It was so much fun. I mean, that's what they did. And every part of my sports experience with Trinity was fabulous. And my academic experience was great as well. But what I took with me was sports. My passion for sports was fueled and continued at Trinity. And then I took it with me. And, then I continued it, like I said, through running. Jane Millspaw and I trained for marathons together. She was part of my Trinity experience, and she was a very good runner herself. And, I parlayed it into another, competitive career of athletics. And like Lori, I also coach. And to this day, I coach. I coached multiple sports when I was teaching. I have to say I love teaching, but I like the coaching the best. And after I went to law school, I practiced law for 2 years and decided I don't really like this very much. And I went back to teaching and coaching. And then I got drugged back into the law firm. I said, you gotta try it again because when you got all this debt from law school, so you really need to go be a lawyer. So I went to a law firm and asked if I could leave at 3:30 every day and go coach. I can't believe I did that. This is before women were allowed to kind of do things like or anybody really did. do it like that. It let me do it for 4 years. And then I went in-house at the hospital, and but that has allowed me to still help with the cross country team at the high school that I went to. So to this day, I coach, I help coach the cross country team out there.
Good for you.
I know that.
So, yeah, that, and yeah, I guess that's what I take with me the most is the love of sports and all of the development and value that I felt at that school and how important it was to me. And, you know, for me, passing that on to youth is one of the most, you know, important parts of my life. So.
Terrific. Thank you. Kathy, what's up?
I do not follow Trinity sports as much as I would like to, with 4 kids and a full-time job and crazy life. But I have been back a couple times, and the facilities themselves, I don't even know where I'm going. I'm trying to get somewhere, and it doesn't exist anymore. So there's definitely that. What I took away, 100% agree with Lanier about just the continued love of sport. I've loved sports my entire, life, but Trinity cemented that. And I would say that those friendships and those ladies that I was talking about earlier, we still get together. We still tell our stories about Mrs. Ruby and all the different things. We've now probably embellished them to the point that they're not even real, but we just have that connection, and it's almost like these people know you differently than anybody else in your life. You've been through, people sometimes take, sports very lightly and just say, oh, you went out and played a game, but it was the bonding that happened and the fact that we would have done anything for each other, and just the laughter and the ups, the downs, all of the different things. Those people will be my friends forever. And that is one of the most important things. And as far as the love of sports goes, I also coach my kids all the way through, but here I am working at a school for kids with autism, and we this year became Arizona's very first school for kids with special needs who fielded a JV basketball game where the boys competed against their typical neurotypical peers. And I was so proud of that, just because it kind of it marries the two passions that I have, working with people with disabilities and sport. So those are the things that I brought from Trinity.
That is fantastic. I have to be honest with you. I obviously do follow all of our sports teams. We have 30, by the way, now, 15 men and 15 women. And trust me, they're having fun. They're laughing. They're winning. But I think we had a better time. The women, some play 2 sports still.
Wow.
Some of them start with 2 sports and don't carry through. And it's by choice. It's similar to what your daughter did, Laurie. You've got year-round training, really. It's voluntary out of season, but all your teammates are doing it. And you've got strength and conditioning, and it's just a nutrition, seminar. And there's a lot of pressure on these athletes nowadays, and they're as competitive as you all were, for sure. And they got better uniforms, and they got better fields, and terrific coaching, without a doubt. But I'll tell you, I don't think they're having any more fun than it sounds like the 3 of you did. So here's the last question I have for you. And I think I'm not going to let you, let me just check my phone here. Any influential folks, women or men, who you think of when you think of Title IX and equity in sport? You can't use Rick Hazelton or Jane Millspa or Jane Fox or Robin Sheppard or Chet McPhee. Is there anybody out there that you've read about, that you follow, that you know about? Lanier?
Something there, please, because that's a very easy one for me.
Yeah.
I grew up with Nancy. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I grew up with Nancy Hogbed Makar. We swam together. I swam behind her, but we swam together. She's 4 years younger than I am, so she's a very good friend. Used to babysit her younger sister. So she's who comes to mind when I think of Title IX, because if you've read anything about Title IX, you know what her role is in enforcing Title IX and the schools she works with. And so she jumps to mind. She also was one of, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she might have been the very first female at Duke that got a full swimming scholarship.
Mhm.
So I remember that about her. And of course, she went on to do great things, as we all know, as an athlete. But then as an adult, you know, she's Title IX is her thing, if you will. So that's who pops to mind for me.
I've never met her, but I've heard her speak at conferences.
Yes.
She's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I've read as much as I can that she's written.
Yeah, she is. She's a very good speaker, and she runs this what's it called, Women's Champion Sports or something. She's the president of that, and she does it. She does a great job, and this is her passion. I mean, she's passionate about making sure that women are treated equally in sports. So,
Kathy, anybody's name pop to you?
That's a great question. It's almost like there's a collective group that I have heard of over the years, but I can't pinpoint one person. I think just anybody who, like Lori and Lanier before me, paved the way for me, and I hopefully helped pave a way for someone else. I feel like it's a movement, and it's something that, I don't have one face or name attached to. It's just something that I think has kind of snowballed and hopefully keeps the momentum for the future.
That's great. That's great. Laurie, anybody that pops into your brain?
Yes, it was a couple women that I met later when I was living in the Boston area. One said she was a Smith exchange student before my time, or maybe while she was there, and she was a good tennis player. Susie, anyway, she played with the likes of Sophie Bell and Kaki on the tennis court. But before that, we one of the first really memorable reunions you orchestrated, Robin, in Boston at the went to a restaurant, a landmark restaurant, but Tina Poole and Olivia Brown, and I don't think City could make it, Francie Dobbin, but that was for me the first time that it just hit me in the face that and they were wearing the old men's jerseys, the rugby shirts.
Rugby shirts, yeah, the wool rugby shirts.
And what I'm thinking is that the stories, when you were just resonated with me, you're saying, the athletes today, yes, they're under an immense amount of pressure, and there's an awful lot. These are very well-established programs at Trinity, at Division I, at D3, Division II. But back in the day, when we were looking at those photos, that video, that the current, I think this was back in was it in the 90s or early 2000s that we did this, and oh my gracious, just to see the laughter and all the jokes, and these women to me were like my heroes, and and I had good fortune of playing field hockey with them, and just it's incredible what they endured and then passed on to us, and now I feel happy to be part of that beginning of the snowball when it was really little, and then it's gotten really big.
That's great. Thank you. So we're going to end tonight's conversation and thank everybody who's still with us listening. It's been recorded, as Sydney said in the very beginning, and I believe it's archived on the Trinity website somewhere. So if somebody had to leave, we totally understand, and you can find it there. I understand from the alumni office, there's going to be a post-event survey that comes out after all these Zooms. It'll come to your email, and you can feel free to fill that out. And also keep your eyes open for an announcement about a female student athlete networking event that's going to, with alumni, it's going to be happening on campus. And what can I say? Thanks to Kathy, Laurie, and Lanier for sharing their memories of competing as a bantam. There's no doubt that you and your teammates and many other women who I hope are listening tonight paved the way for the current student athletes to proudly wear the blue and gold and strive for success. On a personal note, this has been awesome to catch up with the three of you. To our audience, we hope you can appreciate what these and numerous other early birds have contributed to women's sports programs and the progress that's been made. And I just have one final statement, and that is Title IX is 50 years old. That's middle-aged, folks. And it's still a work in progress, right?
Yes.
I'm retired and I'm well beyond middle-aged. And I know that equity and fairness is continues to be Trinity's focus. And all I can say is I am confident that they're going to keep their eye on the ball.
Good one.
For everybody, thank you again and enjoy this weekend, the NCAA Final Four Women's Basketball Tournament. Good night, everybody. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.